The average American home contains 300,000 items. And most people, if you ask them right now, couldn't tell you what a single one of them actually costs to own. Not the sticker price, not what they paid at checkout, what it costs to own, month after month, year after year, while in storage, in maintenance, in replacement cycles, and in the quieter cost that almost nobody factors in. What that capital would have become if it had been working somewhere else. That gap between what you think something costs and what it actually costs is where a significant portion of most people's wealth quietly disappears. By the end of this, you'll have a framework for calculating the real cost of anything you own. And you'll understand why the sticker price is almost always the smallest number in the equation. Total cost of ownership is a concept that businesses use routinely. A company buying a fleet of vehicles doesn't look at the purchase price and stop. They model fuel, maintenance, insurance, depreciation, and the opportunity cost of the capital being deployed. They know that the acquisition number is just the entry fee. The rest of the cost accumulates over time, and serious operators account for it before the first dollar is spent. Individual consumers almost never think this way. They compare a purchase price to zero, to having nothing, and conclude that buying the thing is a straightforward transaction with a clear endpoint. It isn't. Every item you own creates an ongoing financial relationship that started the moment you paid for it and doesn't end until you get rid of it. What makes this worth sitting with is the scale. Most people are running this error not on one item, but across hundreds, sometimes thousands, simultaneously. The individual cost on any given item looks manageable. The aggregate, once you've totaled it properly, rarely does. The real cost of owning something has 3 layers. The first is acquisition, what you paid at checkout. This is the number people focus on, and it's the most visible. But it's also the one that's already gone. You can't affect it. The other 2 keep running long after the purchase is forgotten. The second layer is carrying costs. This is everything you pay in money or time to keep the item in your life. Storage space. Whether that's a dedicated room, a rented unit, or simply the square footage of your home that the item occupies. Maintenance and repair. Replacement when the original wears out or becomes obsolete. The organization systems you buy to manage the accumulation. These costs are diffuse, which is why they're easy to miss, but they compound over years into numbers most people would find uncomfortable if they were totaled and presented in a single line. The third layer is opportunity cost, and this is the one that never shows up on a receipt. Every dollar tied up in something that sits in a closet, depreciates, or gets replaced in 2 years is a dollar that wasn't compounding elsewhere. That's not a judgment about consumption. It's arithmetic. When you stack all 3 layers, the picture changes considerably from what the sticker price suggested. Here's the thing. The carrying cost problem is visible in aggregate even when it's invisible in any individual transaction. The self-storage industry generated $44.3 billion in revenue in 2024. That is money Americans spent exclusively to house things they already bought, not to acquire anything new, just to keep the old things somewhere. About 1 in 10 U.S. households currently rents a storage unit. 30 years ago, that number was closer to 1 in 40. The industry didn't expand because people needed more space out of necessity. It expanded because the rate of accumulation consistently outpaced the available space. And rather than reduce what they owned, people paid to extend the container instead. The average 10 by 10 unit runs about $91 a month. Someone renting one for 5 years, which is not an unusual tenure, spends $5,460 on the unit alone. That's before accounting for the original cost of whatever's inside it, which they've now effectively paid for twice, once at the register and once to warehouse. Clothing illustrates how this plays out at smaller scale. The average American household spends about $1,700 per year on clothes. That same household discards approximately 65 pounds of clothing per year. The items being thrown out are often recent purchases. The cycle runs continuously. Acquire, wear briefly, replace. And because each individual transaction feels modest, the annual total rarely gets examined as a system. The spending isn't concentrated in one large visible decision. It's distributed across dozens of small ones that collectively add up to a pattern that goes unexamined for years. At 7% annual return, $1,700 invested each year compounds to roughly $76,400 over 20 years. That isn't an argument against buying clothes. It's what the autopilot costs when you never chose to run it. Look at the replacement dynamic specifically. Much of what people own isn't designed to last. Appliances that once ran for 15 or 20 years are now engineered to fail closer to 5 or 7, at which point repair costs approach or exceed replacement cost. That's not an accident of engineering. It's a deliberate business model, and the consumer absorbs the full cost of the cycle. Purchase, use, replacement, purchase again, without ever calculating what the repeating interval actually costs over a decade. Two scenarios. The first, someone purchases a rowing machine for $847. They use it consistently for a few months, then it migrates to the spare bedroom and stays there. 3 years later, they're paying a gym membership anyway. The equipment occupies roughly 14 square feet of living space, requires occasional maintenance on the resistance mechanism, and depreciates steadily. The $847 entry cost has since accumulated 3 years of space allocation and an opportunity cost. At 7% annual return, that $847 would have grown to approximately $1,038 over the same period. The machine didn't become a neutral asset once the purchase was made. It became a slow, quiet, ongoing cost that will continue until it finally leaves. The second, someone puts furniture into storage at $91 per month while they decide what to do with it after a move. 4 years pass. They've spent $4,368 on the unit. The furniture inside, if sold at that point, would realistically fetch $320 at most. It's aged, the market for used furniture is soft, and moving it requires effort. The rational decision would have been apparent on day one: sell or donate, recover whatever value remained, and stop paying carrying costs on a depreciating asset. But because the monthly charge felt manageable and the decision felt deferrable, the real cost ran for 4 years without being totaled. This is how most ownership costs work, not as a single visible number, but as a series of small recurring ones that never get added up. The true price test is a 3-input calculation worth running before any significant purchase, and worth running retroactively on things you already own. First, what is the likely carrying cost per year? Storage, maintenance, expected replacement interval. For most consumer goods, 15 to 20% of the purchase price annually is a reasonable starting estimate. A $600 item is probably costing between $90 and $120 a year just to maintain and keep housed before anything else. Second, how long will you realistically own and actively use this item? Not optimistically, realistically. Most people significantly overestimate both usage duration and lifespan at the point of purchase. Third, what is the opportunity cost of the capital? At a conservative 7% annual return, money doubles roughly every 10 years. A purchase you use actively for a decade looks very different from a purchase that sits largely idle for a decade, accumulates carrying costs, and was funded by capital that could have compounded uninterrupted. Run those 3 numbers before committing. The result won't always change the decision. Some things genuinely justify their total cost, but it will make it an actual decision rather than a reflex. The purchase price felt like the transaction, but that was just the entry point. Every item you own is a financial commitment that didn't close at checkout. It closes when the item leaves your life, when you sell it, donate it, or discard it, and not before. The question was never simply whether to buy something. It was what you were choosing to keep paying for as long as it stayed. Most people have never run that number on what they already own. If you do, across a storage unit, a spare room, a closet that hasn't been opened in 2 years, the math tends to make the decision fairly clear on its own. If this kind of financial framing is useful, there's more of it on this channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.